I'd just like to start by acknowledging that we are gathered on the lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung people and pay respects to elders past and present. While we all benefit from the richness of this land, it is important to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I would also like to recognise that First Nations, trans and gender diverse people, sister girls and brother boys have always and will always be a vital part of this community. So here we are, Trans Day of Visibility. My name is Zara. I'm a non-binary trans woman. I'm a community development worker at Thorne Harbour Country, and I'm also an LGBTI peer worker at the Mental Health Locals. And it's great to be here to celebrate with you all for another Trans Day of Visibility. So thank you for coming along. This is an important event. This year, it's also very exciting to raise for the first time in Bendigo the non-binary flag. For those who are unsure of what that means, put simply, it's for anyone whose gender is not aligned at the binary ends of the gender spectrum of masculine and feminine, and who sit somewhere in between, which is how I identify, a non-binary trans woman. So International Trans Day of Visibility was first acknowledged in 2009 as an annual day to celebrate the experiences and achievements of trans and gender diverse people. It was founded by psychotherapist and trans woman Rachel Crandall Crocker. Rachel was the first transgender person to receive the Liberty Bell Award to honour outstanding citizens within the local community, which she was awarded in 2009. She was also recognised as a Pride Month Game Changers honoree in 2023 for her advocacy work. And there are many people throughout history who have contributed to the well-being and development of our social, political and industrial achievements, who also identify under the trans and gender diverse umbrella. Those who join us for some trans trivia this afternoon will learn a little bit more about some of those people. In a moment, you'll get to hear from some local TGD folks who continue to make fantastic contributions to our community. But first, I'd like to introduce a great trans ally on behalf of the City of Greater Bendigo, Mayor Councillor Andrea Metcalf. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you for the opportunity to join you today to celebrate the transgender and gender diverse members of our community. To begin, I too acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're standing on today, the Dja Dja Wurrung, and pay my respects to leaders and elders past, present and future. And I also acknowledge and pay respects to any other First Nations people that may be here today. It's wonderful that Bendigo joins in with cities around the world to mark International Transgender Day of Visibility. An important day of recognition that provides an opportunity to focus on trans pride and gender diverse achievements and raise awareness about the discrimination faced by transgender people. At the City, our focus is creating a safe and inclusive community for all residents. When one of us is safe, all of us are safe. And together as a community, we must work towards creating a safer place for everyone. Within the organisation, we're making training available to all staff focused on trans and gender diverse inclusion and more broadly about LGBTQIA+ inclusion. We want to make sure that staff have the opportunity to understand the lived experience and discrimination experience, understand how they can be an ally and create a more inclusive workplace, and how they can provide trans and gender diverse inclusive services. And this training is supported by actions in our council plan and in our health and wellbeing plan to advance the understanding of the city's role in supporting and strengthening community engagement with our LGBTQIA+ community. I'm really proud of the diversity of our community and the continual steps we take forward ensuring Greater Bendigo is a place for everyone. However, it's not always easy for our trans and gender diverse community, and I admire your resilience and accept that our work is not done as a broader community, and it's probably never been more difficult for our trans and gender diverse community than it is right now with what's happening in the world. I hope that today is a day for reflection on how far you've come, both individually and collectively, and that you enjoy this opportunity to come together with the support of everyone here today. I'd like to acknowledge the immense contribution of trans and gender diverse Bendigo and beyond, especially Sarah Jones, for their a well-deserved round of applause there, Sarah, for their work in providing peer support and contributing to improving the health and wellbeing of the trans and gender diverse community in Greater Bendigo. Attending events like this and raising the transgender flag and the non-binary flag is a way of showing community support for trans and gender diverse people and enables you to feel visible and feel valued and welcome. Thank you all for your attendance today and for being champions for this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor Andrea. And raising these flags here today is part of that commitment to keep pushing forward, to keep lifting each other up, and to keep envisaging a future where trans people are not just visible, but safe, respected, and free to live our lives to the fullest. So after recently stepping into the role of Chair for Trans and Gender Diverse Bendigo and Beyond, our next speaker is working to create visibility and improve the lives of trans and gender diverse people. She identifies as ace, trans, and a parent. Please welcome Kim Malore.
Thank you so much, Zara, and hello everyone. This is my my first speech since coming out as trans, so I'm a bit inexperienced. I'm therefore also probably a bit long-winded, so I hope you'll put up with that for the next few minutes. Love in its purest form is expansion. I wanted to read a quote from a queer Australian author to start with. Dylan Hardcastle. And this is a trans person at the funeral for their lover. Loving you was like opening the windows to let the sun shine in. Because in a world that tells me so often that I should not exist, you made everything worth existing for. Despite all the hardness forced upon us, your love kept me soft. I am beautifully soft, thanks to your tenderness and your care. And I will remain soft for you in your absence. I will enjoy lightly and dance gently and laugh often and remember you fondly until we meet again. I've got a couple of stories from my own family and friends in the recent past. A little girl goes for the first time to an English school across the border. Recite me the Lord's Prayer, says her teacher in the first lesson. She begins, Ein tad yn y nefoedd, sancteddia di enw, deled di deyrnas, gwneler di ewyllus, ar I ddair fel yn y nef. What's this? You don't know the Lord's Prayer, says the teacher. But the little girl only spoke Welsh fluently and had never learnt the Lord's Prayer in English. Little heathen, said the teacher, and punished her in her first lesson in the new school. A few of us would gather around some family photos when I was a teenager. Among them my grandfather, one of my favourite people growing up. There was a picture of me raking leaves aged 11. Who's that pretending to be left-handed? Snapped my grandfather, one of the only times I'd ever heard him irritated. I still remember that moment vividly when someone I loved, and who I knew loved me, got visibly upset about something that was just me and that I couldn't help. I'm a kind of non-binary left-handed. I don't remember this event stopping me finding the weird combination of left and right-handedness, footedness, and I-ness that fits me most closely. I remember experimenting for years, enjoying practicing being ambidextrous, and my peers being simply curious about how I'd play cards or table tennis with my left hand, but write with my right at some ages, and with my left for a couple of years when I was a teenager. In my day, apart from my grandparent that one time, it wasn't an issue. The prejudice against being left-handed is ancient. We have acquired the dangerous, untrusted meaning of the word sinister, from Latin sinistra, meaning on the left. Prejudice seems to have intensified during the Industrial Revolution, when workers started operating complex machinery built for right-handed people, making the left-handers stand out. Prejudice against left-handers is still all over the world in many countries. A still living uncle of mine lived through a time at school when to be left-handed was to be punished and made to write with your right hand. When he left school, he gratefully switched to his left and didn't look back, except to remember the pain of being rapped over the left hand knuckles for being who he was. According to an article by the Washington Post from August 13, 1979, a University of Chicago psychologist, Jerry Levy, said, in 1939, 2% of the population wrote with the left hand. By 1946, it was up to 7.5%, just 7 years later. In 1968, 9%. By 1972, 12%. It's leveling off, and I expect the real number of left-handers will turn out to be about 14%. The number of people identifying as left-handed, as being left-handed, became less stigmatized, less punished in the school system, increased dramatically. The most lovely people in the world can get bent out of shape by the oddest things. Whether you eat with your left hand or your right, what language you pray in, whether you feel like a boy or a girl inside your own skin, or neither. These snatched, fixed opinions are part of being alive. We often have too little time to look more deeply, and it's easier to accept a trusted authority than to think deeply ourselves about something that doesn't affect us. To complain about this is on one level to complain about being human. We all take time to adapt. It's important to be kind to our families and friends struggling with our transness because it's how our minds work. But there's the other side. It must have hurt to be a little Welsh girl, punished for being a little Welsh girl in an English school. It must have hurt being a little left-handed English boy, being punished for being a little left-handed English boy. Today we think we're past such barbarities when people were unkind to minorities for no reason. But different minorities have come into focus, and we're not aware of our own unexamined ideas. Unfortunately today, being trans is one of the minorities facing unkindness and ignorance. It's worse when you also have black or brown skin. The percentage of people identifying as trans is following the trajectory of left-handedness rather exactly. The numbers have gone up, not because we're part of a trend, but because we've always been here, but now we're more accepted, particularly among younger people. It's not unusual for social changes like this to meet backlash and fierce resistance. To see a transgender visibility as new is not to look far enough back in history. I want to finish with a call to action for allies in the coming year. If you're an ally, I suspect you already have transgender friends, which is wonderful. That's where learning starts. Realizing I am female has been one of the great joys and advances in self-understanding in my nearly 6 decades alive. It took me a while to get there because, well, look at me. All the evidence points the other way. But inside my skin, the core bedrock of myself is female, and the maleness is proving to have been a mask and is melting away. It never had any real substance. Everything solid and joyful about me is feminine. Everything for me makes more sense now. I want to dance and smile and joke and love my friends with so much more intensity. I recognize and love my own face in the mirror. I could never, ever see my own face as complete before, as mine. I realized too why I was such an odd kind of male leader, because I was actually a female leader. Being a 6-foot, strong woman, returning home is hilarious when you're faced with a fallen tree, a serviceable chainsaw on the boot, delicately picking sawdust out of your mascara, amidst the fumes of two-stroke fuel. Gender is truly a playground and a rich vein of comedy. Trans people are a walking, talking, laughing contradiction of the cages we've built for ourselves over decades and even centuries. Being on the stall for trans and gender diverse Bendigo and beyond last weekend, it was such a fabulous, hopeful experience to have a constant stream of young, confident, joyful, beautiful trans and LGBT people who turned up and ran the show for us, many of them just for the fun of it, while us oldies took a back seat. You lot, we love you. You're who we do it all for. Please come back and do that again next year. Being trans is hard. No one doubts that in the present climate. But this year, dear allies, I'd like to suggest you focus on trans joy. There is a fixed idea that being trans is only hard, only miserable, and this belief stands in the way of trans acceptance, of trans self-acceptance. In fact, joy is in every single one of us. Love in its purest form is expansion. It deepens us, broadens us. Please, this year, get to know and love more deeply a trans person as a friend, colleague. Forge a deepening relationship with your own gender non-conforming child. Listen to what they ask for. Ask how much it will really cost you to use their new name and pronouns. Ask them how much it would mean to them, to a trans person who feels those pronouns and that name inside their own skin, if you were to do this for them. Listen patiently to what they say. The words may come slowly. Like all love, your friendship and connection with a trans person will expand you and bring you deeper into your own you-flavored joy, and you'll be helping a fellow human being make contact with their own joy. The trans person may cry when you do this. I did. That's how much it means to us to have our joy, the real root of who we are, recognized and loved. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Some beautiful sharing and some beautiful advice as well for our trans allies. So our next speaker today is Avery Barnett-Dacey, a genderqueer trans woman, activist and parent, and currently standing for the Greens in the upcoming election. So please welcome Avery.
Thanks, Zara, and thanks, Kim. That was an absolutely beautiful speech, and this resonated so much with everything you've said. Thank you. Before I start, I also want to acknowledge that we are gathering on the unceded lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung. I pay my respects to all Jara people, extending that respect to elders, past and present, as the true custodians of this land. I believe that for us to move towards a truly sustainable future, our practices must be led by Indigenous knowledge and leadership. Only through this can we begin to heal country, for future generations and for the land itself. While I offer this acknowledgement, I also want to recognise the systemic racism that continues to disproportionately impact our First Nations brothers, sisters, sister girls and brother boys, and all BIPOC communities. Australia remains a colony. Through the act of colonisation, First Nations cultures and ways of being have been deeply harmed, torn from land, language and spirit. The path forward must be through truth and treaty. This is not only true here, in so-called Australia, but globally, where Indigenous communities continue to face dispossession and violence at the hands of colonising forces. The fight for Indigenous sovereignty here is a part of a broader global fight for truth, treaty and justice everywhere. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Before I go too in depth with my speech, I want to fast track through a bit of my history. I'm a genderqueer trans woman who since 2016 has tried to come out on multiple occasions, only once successfully. I've always known to a degree, as in the recurring dreams and childhood longing to peel away a construct I never knew existed, nor had the language or means to navigate the social barriers. Growing up as an undiagnosed neurodivergent always comes with a few mental quirks. Way back in 2014, I found myself homeless, which I now think was in part an attempt to run away from myself. I grappled constantly with my identity, my selfhood, my sense of purpose. During this time, I found myself sometimes squatting, camping in the bush, besides waterfalls and occasionally sleeping in the streets of inner city Melbourne. I still have reflections of the constant reoccurring thought that the only way I could rejoin society was if I had a sex change. I knew full well that I was trans, without still the language nor the community around me to really understand, to embody and to be able to know that I could be accepted and then be able to accept myself. It was quite a few years of opening up and repressing, like a coalescing wave that never quite reached shore. I didn't have the support network or the allies around me. I struggled making connections, especially feeling fundamentally alienated from myself, unable to ever really come home to my own being, yet having had returned from a period of homelessness and needing to integrate what I had learned. I spent a lot of time reading, writing, and studying during this time. I discovered Buddhism, which I used as means to actively repress myself through philosophy. Anatman, the idea of no self. If I had no self, I couldn't have a gender. I wouldn't be attached to this body that provided so much discomfort, or so I thought. But it was just mental gymnastics to avoid my own truth and a sense of my own struggle on the way to my self-acceptance. It took me a few years, but I realized I fundamentally misinterpreted this idea of Anatman. It was selflessness. No persistent self, but one that comes into being and lets go, to no longer grasp and to just be. Acceptance that lets the mind rest. It took me 3 times to come out and live as myself beyond the mask I once hid behind. It's now been over 10 years since I was homeless, and almost 3 years since the last time I came out as being transgender, and I feel extremely proud of how far I've come today. I'm standing as a Greens candidate fighting for what I believe in, human rights, a fair and equal future where everyone is valued, an environment that is cared for and a sustainable future, one where everyone's needs are met and our diversity is celebrated. Through transitioning, the childhood dreams I once lost have begun to resurface. My love of fantasy, writing, my dreams of becoming a park ranger and working in environmental spaces, things I now make active steps towards becoming. I'm getting to have the joys of connecting with community groups, both environmental and gender diverse. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to help with wildlife rescue and to be involved in grassroots activism, to truly feel accepted as myself without fear or reservation, and for this I am grateful. The joys of transitioning and uncovering myself will always outweigh the negatives, and I know I say that from a place of privilege. I know there are people, and perhaps people here today, who cannot, for one reason or another, need to conceal themselves for their own safety, and I truly hope for a future where you can truly inhabit your bodies in the way that you know deeply in your soul. I see you, and I know that these fears are valid. Although I still feel that I'm at the beginning of my journey, I know there is one thing I want to impart onto others in the early days, that progress is not linear, and the support of community is fundamental within our growth. Without community, we can lose ourselves in the isolation of a world that can often reject our light. Always reach out. There is a community that values and will validate your future. I say all of this with the reality of what we are facing in mind. I say this as someone who has been at the receiving end of bigotry, transphobia, gaslighting, and physical abuse. I say this as someone who has been publicly mocked and made the target of someone else's personal hate campaign, as someone who has been followed in the streets, broad daylight, and abused whilst walking with my child. Nobody should go through this, and whilst these negative experiences have been minimal, they have torn through my life so abruptly, and without the supports I now have, I struggled so incredibly deeply. I owe so much to the community that I find myself within, and through this, I choose to remain visible, to remain proud and to fight for the community that has been there for me and that has helped me find the acceptance in my own being. Following Trump's inauguration, we have witnessed a ripple effect of far-right fascism. Our trans siblings in the United States are having rights torn away from them, and through executive orders, an attempt is being made at systemic erasure of trans lives. The calls to support services both here and overseas have skyrocketed unimaginably. And this hate-fueled presidency has emboldened bigots here in Australia. We've seen attacks on medical care for trans youth, the likes of Pauline Hanson trying to push it further. We've seen Clive Palmer put transphobia on the front page of The Age and the Coalition to attempt to import culture wars, to cut diversity funding and to scapegoat our community in the face of real problems. For what it's worth, a question for the Labor Party: what kind of message does it send to the community when your party leader and Prime Minister openly invites a criminal president who is hell-bent on destroying the lives and rights of our queer community? I know our community is all too familiar with being politicised, being reduced to dehumanised talking points in the politics of distraction, when the real issues, the cost of living, the humanitarian and climate crises, are avoided through right-wing culture wars. We need to end discrimination so that we no longer become the pawns of the far right. We need to protect trans youth so they are no longer a political football. We need systemic change so the families and communities are supported through adversity. Human rights should be afforded to all. We should not have to fight for our right to exist. Trans people should be supported and upheld in the community, and our rights should be respected. And for one thing that I know for certain, the wisdom of transgressing can always bring a treasure trove of insight. This is something I will always stand by and will continue to do so with absolute pride. I initially started planning this speech as a call to allies, that considering the light of all this, of the current political climate, an essential message, that now is a good time for allies to show up, to stand up, to not just fight by our side, but be able to fight for us as well, to fight for our rights when we are not in the room, for the allies that may not know a trans person personally, to value our existence and to not see allyship as conditional, to try and understand the depth in which we are feeling as we watch rights stripped away overseas, the legitimate fears people can have in our community of those same culture wars encroaching into our lives. For the allies here today, now is a good time to show up. I know for myself that I will remain visible. I will always stand and fight alongside our community that I am proud to be part of. I will continue to do my best to represent and listen to those here, to grow myself so I can help advocate for the future that respects and values us all. Thank you.
Thanks, Avery. And actually, Rachel reflects on the founding of Trans Day of Visibility as a double-edged sword. So, recognising that visibility can also bring the risks of attacks. And around Australia, as you've mentioned, and across the world, we're seeing a rise in anti-trans violence, with rights of trans people debated, restricted, and in some cases violated completely. But despite these challenges, trans people continue to exist. We will always exist. And because we exist, we will always be visible. So our final speaker today is a proud local trans, non-binary and queer leader, and is the youth project manager for Zoe Bell Gender Collective, where they are passionately working every day for a safe, inclusive and equitable future. So please welcome Teddy Transcendent.
Thank you, Zara, and thank you so much to Mayor Metcalf, Kim and Avery for your amazing words earlier. Thank you all for coming here today to support our trans and gender diverse community here in Bendigo for Trans Day of Visibility. We appreciate you. We appreciate all of the allies who are here with us and for us today. I'm so proud of our trans and gender diverse community here on Dja Dja Wurrung Country. And I want to acknowledge and recognise the Djara people and their continuing connection to the land, waters and culture. I pay respects to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this continent always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'd like to specifically acknowledge sister girls and brother boys, which are sovereign terms for gender diverse Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I stand in solidarity with the different cultural perspectives of queer people throughout history and throughout culture throughout the world. Trans and gender diverse people exist in all communities and all cultures. And when we speak about trans and gender diverse people and communities and the violence we face and the discrimination we face and the abuse that we face, we do so through a Western patriarchal colonial lens. Trans and gender diverse people, LGBTIQI+ people, we all people are victims of colonisation. Colonisation has erased so much of our diverse history across the world. Often we forget about this complexity, the whole picture. We put people in silos, put them in boxes. You can only really be one thing. I certainly cannot be one thing. I'm non-binary, I can't even pick a side. And I'd prefer not to, it just sends me into a complete meltdown. And here I am. We need to remember that people are complex. We aren't just one thing. Every part of you is important. Every part of you is valid and needs to be cared for. It's what makes you incredible and it's what makes you unique. You are not just your gender identity. As a community, we've come a really long way. But also our community has never faced a greater threat than what we are seeing here now in Australia, in Bendigo and overseas. There's been a significant increase in violence and discrimination against our community in the last few years, and since the start of the year, the assaults on our community's human rights and safety have been deliberate, constant, and frightening for us. It's impacting us every single day. Our community is scared for what's to come and often feel forgotten and powerless to do anything about it because we're not seeing that strong allyship from those in positions of power and those in mainstream organisations. Those whose hearts are filled with fear and hate towards our community have made a deliberate shift to target trans and gender diverse people since the marriage equality plebiscite, because it's more socially acceptable to hate us than to hate gay people who are cisgender and to hate lesbian people who are cisgender and bisexual people who are cisgender. Trans and gender diverse, even worse, they're targeting those of us who are the most vulnerable, and it's having a significant impact on the mental health of the whole community. Trans and gender diverse kids, they're targeting kids, they're targeting young people, they're targeting trans women, and they're targeting people of colour. For decades, we've heard stories of abuse against our community and against young LGBTQI+ people, where we're often told and have been told that we should be expecting to be rejected and shunned from our family and communities for inviting them in to know us better. When we develop mental illnesses as a result of this abuse, trans people are then seen as the problem that's caused it, and they don't look at the environment around that's actually resulted in that mental ill health becoming an acute issue. It's not that your families aren't supportive, it's not that they weren't supportive. You are a survivor of family of origin violence, and it's time that we start naming it for what it is. Our trans and gender diverse young people are pioneers. They are young. They don't remember the decades, century-long fight that the LGBTQI+ community have been fighting. They weren't there. But now they've found themselves unwillingly at the front lines in the fight for equity. Amazingly, and I'm so proud that this is the first generation where trans and gender diverse people have been able to be out and proud in their school environments. However, they need to be protected and they need to be supported, and sadly there are too many stories of those who aren't. Being a trans person in a regional area is significantly more challenging than those who are living in the inner cities. But collectively, I need you all to know that Australians across the country support us and our rights overwhelmingly. The ones who are perpetrating violence against our community are a small minority. They are loud and they are organised, but they are tiny. In February, there was a survey done by Equality Australia who found that 91% of Australians agree that trans people should have the freedom and choice to live their lives in a way that makes them happy. 81% of people across Australia that were surveyed agreed that trans people deserve the same rights and the same protections as other Australians. They asked that same question in 2020. We're up from 78% up to 81%. It is rising, and it is harder for us to see it here because there are so many less people and so many more people against us here than there are in the cities, but you are supported. For community, I also would love to remind you, we forget that visibility is not only external. Visibility is internal too. What are you doing to show up for yourself, to advocate for yourself every day? For me, I try to have good sleep hygiene. I'm not very good at it yet, but I'm doing my best. I try to eat breakfast and I try to do my laundry and I try to lean strongly into the joy every day. Lean into the joy, look for the joy, find your queer joy. What are we here for? What are we doing this for? What are we fighting for if it is not for us to be able to live our lives with the joy that we have, that we want to share with everybody? We're celebrating Trans Day of Visibility. TGD people, they have to be visible, and they have to be visible every day, whether they want to be or not. We've definitely seen an increase in microaggressions, people looking at you on the street, people yelling, street-based violence and abuse. For our allies in the audience, consider how much additional emotional work is involved when every time you pop to the shops is a political statement. We need to remember the things that we have when things are hard. We have our queer joy. Look for it, share it, tell people about it. We have each other. Wish your friends a happy Trans Day of Visibility. Having your friends show up for you authentically is often enough to remind yourself that you can show up for yourself and that you can show up for others. Reach out to a friend. And when someone reaches out to you, let them help you and support you in the way that you need. We all have visibility, internal, external. And visibility is also around our values and about our work that we do. Visibility is not just about your gender identity. Visibility is not just about your sexuality. It's about showing up as your authentic best self that you see yourself being, and being proud of it, and doing what you can to make a better future for your community and for your world. It is not your responsibility to make someone comfortable about your difference and about your existence. If they don't understand you and they do not want to understand you and they do not want to listen to you and hear your perspective, that is them. That is a them issue, and you need to be protecting yourself and your well-being and your safety. We release what we can't carry and what doesn't serve us. And we cannot carry the weight of other people's problems with us because we have enough to bear and enough to haul around. We reach out for support when we need it and we give it when we can. There are so many different supports that are for our community, and so many of us don't think that what we're going through and our needs is as important as someone else who might have it harder. I'm here to tell you today that is bull. You need to be calling those hotlines, calling those crisis numbers, calling the Rainbow Door, getting the referrals, using those services, calling the homelessness services, all of it, calling the violence services. Because when we access services, we show them that we need them. We need to stop hiding. That is a way of you being visible and showing up for yourself and showing up for the future. Without that data, they will not fund things that support us, and we need it desperately. So reach out. Thank you to all of the incredible organisations that are doing the work and who are ensuring that trans and gender diverse people are safe, are seen, and that our specific needs are being addressed. Thank you to all the LGBTIQA+ and trans and gender diverse organisations that are doing this work and are doing it usually with extremely limited funding and resources. We know that gender-based violence impacts trans and gender diverse people disproportionately, yet we are left out of these conversations too often. We need those who are in positions of power and privilege to make sure that we are invited to the table, that we are listened to, and that we have access to the resources that we need. We need you to show us that you see us, show us that you value us, and show us that you respect us. Supporting our community should be part of your everyday. It should be part of your business as usual and not be reserved for days like today, for Ida Hobbit, for Wear It Purple Day, for Trans Awareness Week, Trans Day of Remembrance. We need you to stand up and show those who oppose us and spread transphobic ideologies that you are with us and that you support us. Because we can't solve this problem. They don't listen to us. They don't want to listen to us. We need you. And we want to work with you for a better future for everybody. So work with us. Donate to trans and gender diverse organisations, donate to queer organisations, donate to crisis support hotlines, and talk to everyone in your life about how important it is to respect trans and gender diverse people. Happy Trans Day of Visibility.
Thank you, Teddy, and thank you to all our amazing speakers today, and thank you to everybody here. No matter how you identify your gender, your presence, your support, and your advocacy matter. So let's keep being visible and keep being awesome. Later tonight, the city will be lighting up the conservatory in trans colours, and it's a great opportunity to take photos, share them on social media, and to help amplify our messages that we've spoken about here today. And after we raise the flags, please join us at Thorne Harbour Country, which is 58 Mundy Street. We'll be having some afternoon tea and some games and obviously some wonderful company. So yeah, happy International Trans Day of Visibility. Let's raise some flags.
So excited about this. Oh my God.